of acceptance. If anybody recalls what things were like then, things were a little more accepting in 2016, even though we didn't feel so. I began my journey socially, and I didn't begin medical transition until 2021 during the height of the pandemic. That was very difficult mentally and physically. And 5 years later, I have been through numerous surgeries, numerous counselors, and I have found myself. I found myself, and I couldn't be happier. I wish I never had to go through any of that. I wish I could take for granted when I look in the mirror and I just see a person and I put on my work clothes and I go to work and I come home and there's my spouse and children. I wish I could have had that, but I was chosen for some reason for a different path. And that path has led me here today, and it's wonderful. I am so happy to be myself. And I think about the transgender and non-binary and queer people in the room today. And I want you to think about this on the Day of Visibility. Think about just a few of us that are in the room today. And think about all the number of us that are not here, and not just in this room, but not alive on this earth. That's very important, because there's also an eradication of the ones that are yet to come, the ones that haven't come out yet, the ones who are still trying to find out who they are. And while we might feel safe here in Portland, Oregon, there's so many more that are not safe out there, that are not visible. And I want you to think about that. I want you to recognize us today. And I appreciate that you have had us here to speak before the council. And I just want to share that with you today. So thank you very much. And I want to pass the mic on to Azariah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. I want to also thank, Daphne and Reed as well for sharing your stories. You know, it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard in a time when you have to be rock solid to open up. And, like they said, transgender visibility was something that was created in 2010. I came out in 2015. Right now we're on Chinook land. I am originally from Tiwa land, which is known as Albuquerque, New Mexico. At this point in time, I knew one trans man, and he was hours away. And at this time, when I finally had come out my freshman year, the big day was Trans Day of Remembrance. Because unfortunately at that point, we didn't have the capacity to also be visible because we had so many to remember and we were trying not to die, just like we are in this point in time. I remember, there wasn't a lot of queer people around when I grew up, and so my community was found through books and history. And I remember the first time I went into the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, which at the time was the only space in the Southwest that actually catered to trans people and our needs, and was actually all the people on staff were trans. I had probably been on hormones maybe 6 months. I might have had 2 chin hairs, and I just looked like a little butch lesbian. But I remember walking into this place where there was couches and there was kitchens and there was a library and there was computers, and you didn't have to give anybody your ID. You didn't have to pass a background check. You could just go in and use these facilities, which a lot of people are like, that's, everybody should have that. That's not something that we have. But I remember walking in, and there was a table. In our community, we call the trans girls dolls because they always be looking like dolls, but we call them dolls. And there was a table of native dolls, native trans women. And I just remember them hyping me up. Oh, look at this handsome man, da 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 da. They saw me when I didn't see myself. And for the next couple weeks, I would go and continue to get close to them. And one day I remember sitting there, and one of the girls walks in and she asks the other girls, did you hear about so-and-so? And they said, no, or yeah, I did, da da da. And I didn't understand what they were saying. And I knew the statistics and I had read people's stories, but I didn't understand what they were saying. And another one goes, yeah, actually, I do remember my tent was 2 tents down from her. And I remember when I heard people started to mess with the tents. And so I got some sticks and some rocks, and they didn't come for me. So I fell asleep. And when I woke up, the police were telling me someone had been killed. And in that moment, it clicked. When they said that she was the one from this weekend, they meant she was the one that got killed this weekend. And not in that moment, I realized all the books I had read and all the stories that I had read, they weren't in the past. They were what we were living now. And that's when I knew, before I knew I had helped queer people, but in that moment I knew that my life had to be dedicated to us because we were the only ones that were going to dedicate our lives to us. And that is why Trans Day of Visibility is so important, is because we have to remember ourselves, we have to fight for ourselves, we have to do all these things, but there's not a lot of days where we get to celebrate being here. Just like Daphne had said, my story is not so uncommon, especially down south, but a lot of us, we spend most of our lives hating ourselves. We spent, I remember praying to be a boy, and then I remember praying to die. And it wasn't until, I would say about 5 years ago, I looked in the mirror, I can remember the exact moment, and I saw myself. And I just remember crying because I was like, this is what cis people feel every day. They could go on a jog, y'all could put a little bit of makeup on, maybe get a haircut, and that's it. I was a sophomore in college and I paid $7,500 out of my own pocket while supporting myself working 80 hours a week so I could be visible. And, a couple of years ago, a lot of my life fell apart. And what kept me up is because I need to be visible for the younger generation. You know what I mean? I need to be out here speaking and doing these things. But the only reason I have these opportunities is because of people like Kelly, who come in, instead, not just saying she's an ally, she shows up. She's not part of our community, but she chooses to be in it every day. And you guys can sit here and you can listen to me, but I'm gonna give you a challenge to not just come and tell us you support us, but show us you support us. Do you know any of our trans leaders in our community? Could you name one of them? Now, how about a trans person of color that's in your communities that you work for? Being an ally is just not wearing on the pin. Being an ally is not just opening the door and letting me in the room. Being an ally is when we're not looking. And, we are brave enough to put ourselves on the line, not only as a trans person, but as a native Chicano. I'm very blessed that, which is sad to say, I'm not the darkest person in the room a lot of the time, but I am here. And so not only is it, being visible to be trans, but visible to be a person of color, to be Latino, to be a native, just like Reed was saying, to have an X on my marker. I know I'm kind of going everywhere, but I think a lot of this needs to be said. Another thing with visibility is, as a native person, my tribe is Dine, and in our culture, we celebrate 5 different genders. Most native communities, we had multiple genders, we had trans people, and that is being actively erased as it has since the day the Spaniards set foot. And so that's what these days are about, is visibility. Another thing I'd like to say is, when I look around at this council, I don't see anyone that looks like me. I didn't have anybody other than Michael that came up that said, hey, I'm a trans person. And I think that that's something that I hope that you guys take with you from this day of being an ally. I love to see the pins and I love to see the flags, but I would love to see you at drag shows. I would love to see you Thursday night at Transalicious, which is the only ongoing all trans cast in the city of Portland, who is run by a native Black trans woman who's been out doing the work over 25 years. And I'm gonna leave you with a little bit about more of the road we go through. Our surgeries, they were created on intersex children. And then, when we started to get a little more of our community, we started pumping ourselves. We started doing our own surgeries because we would have rather risked our lives to have a moment to look at ourselves and recognize ourselves than have to live in these bodies that we don't recognize. But on a better note, I do want to say that you guys, even just letting us in here is a change. I would have never, if you would have told me 5 years ago, before I moved out of Albuquerque, that you were gonna let this little ghetto hood rat into this place and you were gonna listen to me for this long, I would have never believed it. So even just that is a change. But like I say, it's not enough. We're dying every day. by our own hands, by the hands of others, by the hands of the government. And you guys have an amazing opportunity to make the change and to make this even more of a safe place. 10 years ago when I came out, I heard of Portland being weird. And I thought, hey, maybe I might not be the weirdest one in the room. I usually am, but every once in a blue moon out here in Portland, it's not. So I kind of got mixed around. Again, my name's Azra Ibarra. I go by he, they pronouns, and I'm from Occupy Tijuana in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for listening to me. I am going to pass it to our final speaker, Nalove.
Oh, I'm very tall, so hold on. Just gonna hold it, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Nay Love. I am a drag queen here in Portland, Oregon. I'm really grateful to be here today. I would have never thought someone like me would be sitting in a room full of counselors and people who make decisions. So I really appreciate being here for that. I also really appreciate hearing from all of the speakers before me. I wish I wore waterproof makeup because I was not prepared for how emotional this would be, but in all actuality, it makes sense. Today is Trans Day of Visibility, and I would like to echo that. It could stand to see more people like me in this room or online. Part of doing those and finding people like me to be in the space with you is to go out into those spaces, make friends, encourage your trans friends to apply for that role. Go stand up for them when for some reason they were denied for circumstances that were obviously transphobic or obviously racist. I walk into a room skin first. Everywhere I walk in, people are going to see Black first. I am 6'4" out of drag. So when I walk into a room, most people see Black man first. My pronouns are she or they. I am trans non-binary. I lived my life as a trans woman for 2 years before I started living my life as a non-binary person. And the biggest thing that I learned during my transition was there is so much more work to be done. I lived my life as a gay man before that, and you couldn't tell me nothing. There was not a place that I couldn't walk in and get the job. There was not a place that I wasn't there and I wasn't safe. There might be places that wasn't super comfortable with my femininity, but being as huge as I was and being what everyone saw was a Black man, I was always safe. When I transitioned, it took me 9 months to find a job. I only found a job because I applied using my dead name and I went in looking like a male. That is when I learned that there's no advocacy for me in the places that are doing the hiring, in the places that are making the decisions for who even gets an interview. The only thing different about my applications was my name, and I would still put my legal name in there. The only thing different about me getting a job and not getting a job was being trans. And that is insane. That also opened my eyes so much on how much male privilege there is in this world running rampant. Keeping women out of spaces seems to be the ideal goal, seems to be why they are trying to keep trans people out from being seen, because there is something so powerful about releasing the standards that have been set by people that aren't here. There's something very powerful about someone who is told their whole life that they are a man when they put on their first dress, when they get to go out in public, defying the rules that were presented to us. There is such a freedom. I don't think I've ever experienced that. You are looking at someone who is part of the 90s boom of adopted Black kids. Me and my full-blood sisters were adopted by white Christian nationalists, in a large boom of hundreds of thousands of Black kids all across the nation that were adopted, taken away from their family, and given into white homes, most of which were Christian nationalist homes. I'm a product of that. I grew up believing that you should love everyone, that everyone deserves love, and you should not mistreat anybody. Yet I was terrified of gay people. I was terrified of Black people. I would be uncomfortable in a space that seemed extra ethnic. I wasn't raised with parents that sought out racism or tried to be rude or did anything different than what we do every day. The difference for them versus me is I experience racism on a daily. They were led to believe that racism ended when the slaves were freed. Because of that, I got years of harm to undo, to realize, oh, that is why I was harassed. That's why my sisters and I were kicked out of that place. That's why they did not allow me and my sisters to get that second scoop of ice cream when all the other kids got to. I understand that having us in your space is more important than anything. I don't know how many people tell me, I've never met anyone like you. And that is just so unfortunate because I'm really fabulous. But more than that, I feel like I was really blessed with the perspective to understand why we believe what we believe and how we can change that to actually benefit us. And so I do just want to take this time to implore you, find some trans friends, go out to the gay club, follow people online, follow their Instagram, follow their stories, share their story, tell them to hire. When your company is hiring, go out into these places, make new friends, be like, you would be great. Recommend them for these jobs. Get more people in these doors because the more people like me that can be behind the room making decisions, the less people like me get left behind. That is all I'm going to leave with you guys. Thank you so much.
Colleagues, would you like to say a few words? Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. First, want to thank our guests for joining us today, for sharing space in the chamber. Thank Kelly and the community of leaders here at Metro, including our ERG, that helped organize today, making sure that we have space in our own building, making sure that we have time in our own work schedule. That's the first step. And it was wonderful to be in community drinking our coffee and tea this morning. But this is just one day out of the year. And as I thought about making a post on social media this morning, I actually realized how many trans people in my life are not on social media. One, they have better mental health than I have. But two, it shows how unsafe this world can be and how targeted folks can be. Even as social media and the internet can be a resource and it can be freeing in some ways, it can also be extremely harmful and dangerous, which makes the work we do in real life, face to face with another person, in our community, in our neighborhoods, on our streets, even more critical here in our workplace, making sure that when we actually have an opportunity in front of us to make an investment, to change how this building works, to change how our workflow works, to change, as you pointed out, how HR works, that we do it and we resource it to the fullest extent that we can. We've made a couple of steps forward, but we have so much more to do. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your joy, your stories, your pain, your humanity. Thank you.
Okay, well, just want to thank each of you for being here today.
Sorry, no, go ahead. I'll speak after you.
Oh, okay. And sharing your stories. And we as a council and as individuals are committed to holding your words as we continue Metro's work in making our region a place of safety and dignity where trans individuals and communities can thrive. So we're fortunate to have each of you here today. Daphne, I would actually thank you for your call to action as well, and looking at our housing policies, especially for affordable housing. So I think we'll have a work session on that coming soon, so we can dive a little more deeper into that. I was really moved by that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Wong. I know you usually try and speak last, so I was like, oh, I didn't gonna get my hand up in time. I want to just give a sincere thank you to the folks that came today to share very transparently, very openly your stories and how powerful it is to be vulnerable in a space like this. It really struck me really deeply. And especially being able to read some of the exhibit and the signs outside that the Metro staff have put together. I feel, this tremendous sense of pride at how our city and our region is like this beacon on the hill about what our country can be and should be, and also recognizing the immense amount of work that we still need to do. And so I heed that call to action from each one of you about the things that still need to be improved, about the representation, about the investment, about policy that makes sure that our promises are actually delivered to each of you and to folks and that want to call this place home. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm very glad that I got to hear from y'all. Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say also thank you for coming and sharing your stories. I'm cautiously proud of the open space that Metro creates, although I'm sure there's more we can do, and I hope you feel entirely comfortable in this space. I am also curious, and I hope that we can share the wealth, as you might say, such that the other cities and the other councils and the other regional governments in this area can also hear from people such as yourselves on the same day and realize what they're missing if they're missing it. And I hope that we can spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Just real briefly, I just want to thank our guests and thank you for sharing, but also being vulnerable. You are human. We are all human, and we need to honor that fact. With that, I will say that we have a lot of opportunities for you to engage, and I hope that this isn't your last time coming into this building, 600 Northeast Grand. You are always welcomed in our house. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
And bring more folks.
colleagues, should we take a brief recess?
Yes.
Let's take 5. We'll be back in, let's do 11:25.
We are just about to get started again.
Sudden light.
It should be.
Okay.
Okay. We're back online recording.
Yep.
All right. Well, if we can move on to our next presentation, which is the Westside Economic Alliance Industrial Lands Readiness Work Group recommendations. So one of Metro's core functions is to develop an urban growth report every 6 years. In 2024, Metro completed its most recent report, which included an assessment of buildable employment industrial lands in the region. In the wake of that decision, the Westside Economic Alliance, or WEA, convened a regional work group to review the methodology for assessing industrial lands and readiness to meet the emerging needs of industries and businesses in our region. I'm pleased to welcome Catherine Charlo, Director of Planning, Development, and Research, to introduce the topic and guest speakers. And I also want to, before we start, thank you all for coming in. I think you all had presented at MPAC, and I was like, this is great data that the council needs to hear. So thank you for doing the presentation again for the whole council. Catherine.
Thank you, Acting President Huang and councilors. We're really pleased to be here today. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give some context, and then our partners at Westside Economic Alliance and Clackamas County are going to speak as well, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. But one of the things I want to frame up for you all today is this linkage that we are starting to really articulate between Metro's growth management work and our economic development work. And I think this is a really good example of that. This is also in addition to a report on the activities that the Westside Economic Alliance is going to talk about. It's an opportunity for you all to start to hear from partners who are bringing information forward to follow on from your adopted recommendations on economic prosperity from about a month ago. So joining us to give this presentation today are Elizabeth Mazzara Myers from the Westside Economic Alliance and Jamie Stasny from Clackamas County. And before I turn it over to them, I just want to orient us to where we are in that follow-up process from your economic development, the approval of the economic development recommendations. So you voted to approve Resolution 265570 just over a month ago, which directed COO Madrigal to create a work plan. That work plan includes the creation of a new job-ready lands program. It includes supporting the update of the comprehensive economic development strategy work led by Greater Portland, Inc. It includes creating opportunities for Metro leadership in economic development and prosperity activities. And it includes incorporating Metro's equity and climate work into the activities moving forward. We will be coming back to you on May 7th in a work session to share an overview of the work plan that you requested at the last council session on this topic. Here's a teaser. Over the next few months, we're going to bring you informational and discussion items on a few different topics, including industrial land supply and the Job Ready Lands Initiative. And we'll get a little bit of a flavor of that today. We'll bring some information on data centers. We'll bring information and a presentation on the SEDS, which I mentioned before, the process update there. You'll be getting information on urban growth management decision follow-up in addition to what you're hearing today. And there's opportunities for others as well. And one of the things we'll ask you at the end of today's session is if there's other either topics or folks you would like to have come back in front of you over the next few months. I think I'll just, with that, hand over the presentation to Elizabeth and Jamie. And then I'll come back just briefly at the end to frame up some additional topics. So welcome. We're really appreciative of you all taking the time to come and describing the work that you've put quite a lot of effort into. So I'll let you introduce yourselves in just a little bit more detail as well.
Wonderful. Hello, Acting President Huang and councilors. I'm Jamie Stasny. I am the Transportation and Land Use Policy Manager at Clackamas County and also a proud member of the Westside Economic Alliance. That might surprise some people, but there are members all across the region. I want to say thank you to Catherine and the rest of the Metro staff for being such great partners in all of this work. We have been convening conversations to collaborate around this work and really appreciate the openness and the opportunity to speak to you all today. We're really excited to be here to share with you the memo that we've created. That memo was generated from months and months of work. We actually started working on it last February, so it has been a long journey to get to this point, so thank you for having us. The memo is intended to be a starting point of a conversation. It's not a set of recommendations and we're done. We're here to work. We're here with also representing our private sector partners who want to be a part of the conversation that you all are having so that we can all work toward a bright economic future for our region. I'll start with a little bit of context about how this effort started. Catherine shared a little bit about that. So at the end of the 2024 urban growth management process, I was a part of that discussion as a member of MTAC. MTAC asked MPAC and Metro Council to convene a work group of industry experts to look more closely at Metro's buildable lands methodology. It became apparent during that process that there was a mismatch in between the industrial land that was being counted as buildable and what the market actually needs. After conversation with Metro staff, I asked Elizabeth at WEA to convene this work group. They had just completed at WEA a transportation funding work group that was a really great process and seemed like a really good fit. So Elizabeth was willing to take that on. The work group convened and set a goal to review the methodology used by Metro to count buildable employment industrial lands and present specific recommendations to better align the count of buildable industrial land with market realities. I'll turn it over to Elizabeth now to introduce herself and to share more about the makeup of the work group.
Great, thanks. Next slide. And one more slide. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. For the record, Elizabeth Mazzara-Myers. I'm the Executive Director of the Westside Economic Alliance, and I always like to talk a little bit more about who we are. We're an organization that's been around for almost 30 years out on the West Side, and that we actually predated by two previous organizations that came together in 1998. So in some form or fashion, we've been around for 45 years out on the West Side. We are a public-private partnership. Per our bylaws, we have 6 seats on our board held for public sector. We also have 3 seats held for nonprofit. We currently have labor members at our board. So while we are a business association advocating for what's good for what we believe is a healthy economy, we come to it with a different perspective. We sit at our board table and have really hard conversations. We sit at our community rooms and have really hard conversations. And we try to answer the questions before we leave those rooms of who's pushing back from what direction. And I think that makes us uniquely qualified to do this kind of work. And so I was very happy when Jamie came forward with this suggestion. It was important for us that this group include representatives from many different perspectives. And so we have private sector, you can see the list here, private sector practitioners, including developers, planners, commercial real estate specialists, and economists. In other words, people that are out there in the market doing this work every day. In addition, you'll see many representatives from public sector jurisdictions, including Clackamas County and many jurisdictions, many Washington County cities. I think it's also important, though, to point out that one of the public sector jurisdictions represented was Metro. Metro had 3 of your staff as a partner throughout the work group. They attended every meeting, provided input as equal partners, including providing us direct edits to the recommendations that we'll be talking about today. So again, when we started back in February, Metro was at the table. When we finished the memo, Metro was at the table. And that was important, one, to have them there as subject matter experts, but 2, I think it was a great opportunity for us to build trust. It would not be the first time some of you have heard me say that there's a sense, both from business and from folks that don't represent the downtown core, that sometimes other parts of the region get forgotten. And so I think it was a great opportunity to have folks out on the west side, hearing directly from folks that do that work. Additionally, we invited representatives from DLCD to come. So for 2 of our workshops, we had DLCD representatives to provide guidance about specific land use goals and processes. And again, that was another opportunity to build trust and relationships. This collaborative, iterative process is how WEA approaches our work, and it's reflective of our theory of change. At WEA, we recognize that we have to work together if we're going to find a way through the challenges we face together. Next slide. Here's what we learned, and these are snapshots I took on my phone of our first day of meetings when we started trying to understand what the work was that was ahead of us. Right out of the gate, we realized that the issues that our economy faces were much larger in scale than what the short-term work group would be able to address. What was important about the conversation and about these notes from these whiteboards is that it reflected that there are a multitude of issues that our group identified as worthy of time and energy. However, we tried to stay focused on the short-term goals outlined as identified by Metro, which was to review the methodology used to count buildable employment industrial land and better align the count with market realities. To that end, it's very important for me to say this as clearly as I can. These recommendations do not address growth. They do not recommend a boundary expansion. They do not talk about current land needs. What we focus on is how to count the land and how that land matches up with market needs. Our hope is that these recommendations set us on a path for the region to develop a realistic 20-year and beyond employment land supply and economic forecasting system that, 1, reflects market realities, 2, supports economic growth, and 3, bridges public and private sector perspectives concerning ongoing economic certainty. Next slide. And so after 8 or so months of meetings, we summarized our findings in an early draft memo, as Jamie mentioned, back in September. At that point, we requested an opportunity to share our findings with the 3 Metro councilors who were concurrently working on the economic development recommendations, including the Jobs Ready land recommendation. We are, as a side note, excited and supportive of that work. We're especially excited about the prioritization of Jobs Ready land as a central component of the economic development lens for the region. We understand that some of that scoping work has already begun. We want to encourage Metro to ensure all your regional partners are included in these conversations and that you allow us to help you dig into the deeper issues. After having spent 25 building trust, we want to help you continue down that path. Next slide. And so one of our recommendations was that Metro adopt a problem statement. We want to acknowledge that you recently adopted a resolution on economic development and applaud your intention to level up Metro's involvement and intentionality around economic vitality in your work. This resolution referenced the WEA memo included in your packet. We greatly appreciate staff's efforts to include a reference to the memo, and while that resolution was a great step forward, a key issue still remains. Next slide. We drafted this problem statement as a starting point, but it really gets at a core issue that is critical to acknowledge. The goal here for us is that there is a mismatch between the count performed by Metro that identifies, quote, surplus industrial land with the realities faced by planners and developers in the market. It is important to note that although there are agreed upon limitations in the current urban growth report acreage count, Metro counts the land as zoned. And so the UGR is not an assessment tool, it's a counting tool. The baseline of our work rests on the belief that a gross acreage count does not tell the full story of the regional's industrial land. We are keeping this problem statement for our own work and as a North Star. And while we appreciate being included in the recently adopted resolution, we want to make sure that all the work that we do is guided by this problem statement. Next slide.
So our second recommendation is really focused on public agencies. Public agencies, as you all know and experience, often lack the resources to do the work that needs to be done to happen to support timely industrial land readiness. So to help with this challenge, one of the recommendations that we put forward is to allocate funds through the 2040 planning and development grants for cities and counties to bring on staff or hire consultants to support the planning efforts, including analysis of and necessary changes to zoning, comprehensive plans, and other needs related to growth for the duration of their economic analysis project. Similar to Metro Council's recent Housing Production Accelerator Fund, but for employment lands. We'd love to see something like that. During the work group, we also learned some really interesting things. We had some light bulb moments, I would say, in the room where folks were like, what? We think about this stuff all the time, but having such a great mix of people at the table made it possible for us to share ideas in a new way. And during that process, Ted Reed was at the table with us and shared that there is a site-specific mid-cycle industrial land UGB expansion opportunity, even when a regional need has not been identified in the urban growth report. And we were like, wait a minute, what? And there's a lot of people around that table that think about this stuff a lot, that have been working on this for many years. And that was a complete surprise. Nobody uses that process. It's been underutilized. And I think it's because people don't know about it. Also could be issues with its practicality and potentially cost. We'd love to partner with Metro to create a supported pathway for those opportunities as appropriate. Make sure people know that they're out there. Next slide, please. Another related challenge local agencies face is burdensome double planning efforts. And this has really shown up a lot in Washington County. Our partners from Washington County brought this idea forward. There's concept planning required at Metro. Makes sense, right? You want to bring an area inside the urban growth boundary, come up with a concept plan and show how it's going to work. Makes sense. That process is long, it's arduous, it's expensive. Often Metro funds those efforts or collaborates to help fund them. You get all the partners on board, everyone agrees, and then their urban growth boundary process happens. And then after the UGB expansion has been approved, they move into comprehensive planning. And during comprehensive planning, it is the local jurisdiction's ability to integrate the concept plan into their work. One of the challenges that happens during this also arduous, expensive process is that some of the items from the concept plan get lost in translation. Critical facilities that were agreed upon by different layers of government just drop out of the plan. And for us to have a comprehensive implementation of the concept plan, we have a gap. We have an issue there. And it costs a lot of money. Why are we spending $2 million plus when we could have a more concise process that's efficient? So we would love to see Metro Code Title 11 be amended to require that the comprehensive plan phase be focused only on implementing the approved concept plan. Because the concept plan phase includes all of the required elements, everyone's on board, they've already agreed. Using the money saved from this process could create opportunities to do something like a revolving loan fund or something else. There's all these ideas. We need, money for infrastructure. So there's a lot of thoughts that could be pursued with the additional resources saved by a more efficient planning process. Next slide, please. As Elizabeth shared, one of the key points of this group was really to focus on that mismatch between the Metro model and the market reality of industrial land supply. As Elizabeth also said, we all have to work together to develop technical fixes to refine this process. It's about transparency. It's about trust. And it's about being honest with ourselves about what land we have and what is actually usable for. It's often reported that there's sufficient land for industrial and employment use. I want to acknowledge that during the last process, Metro took a different route, worked with a consultant, and brought lands in Sherwood for large lot industrial. That was really forward thinking. How do we make sure we have the type of land needed for the uses, for the industries that we want to attract and retain? That kind of thinking is what we're hoping to see applied as we move forward. So in alignment, we think very much with the jobs direction that you have given, the Jobs Land project. We would love to see Metro develop and adopt a grading and tiering system that considers included but not limited to lot size, geometry, slope, natural features, access to infrastructure, contiguity with other developable parcels. We really want to be thoughtful about what these lands are and what their restrictions are as well. We would also love to see some changes potentially at the state law level and work together to think about an aspirational industrial land supply. It takes forever for development to occur, especially for large industrial uses. And we are sometimes constrained by the current land supply. So how can we be thoughtful about that and be aspirational so that we can create the environment to attract the businesses that we want to see?
Next slide. Next slide.
Next slide, please.
Great. And tied into that is a recommendation we have around approaching how we forecast growth. You know, we understand that Metro is mandated to utilize PSU's population forecast, which shows currently population decline. But what we recommend is future urban growth report economic modeling should work to predict future economic performance, including results from planned economic interventions and growth opportunities. This follows DLCD's goal, number 9, I'm going to try that sentence again, sorry. This follows DLCD's goal 9 recommendation that aspirational forecasting guides the work done to prepare the urban growth report. When launching the urban growth report process, Metro should adopt an aspirational directive when forecasting available land supply to support our future we want. Next slide. One of the strongest recommendations that came from the work group was the creation of a new table to be staffed by Metro that centers the voices of business and industry with a focus on economic development. I want to just caveat that I know Metro has many tables. We don't necessarily need a brand new table, but what we want is to make sure as you start doing this work on economic development that we're including some of these points that we're bringing along today. We believe that this table should include industry experts and technical staff and serve as an advisory group to MTAC, MPAC, and Metro Council. They would provide insight into best practices from other states and cities and help identify where there are gaps in staffing, revenue, and policy. And this table can and should collaborate on technical work sessions around commercial real estate development topics for MPAC, MTAC, and Metro Council with private sector subject matter experts to educate on the importance of quality land in the UGB, helping identify needed changes to the regional and state land use system. We have a specific timeline that we were asking for. Within 1 year, and then at agreed upon periodic basis, the table should work with Metro staff to create a report that will outline economic realities and opportunities throughout the 3 counties. The report must discuss whether the current land supply is meeting market demands, identify where there is a mismatch, and make recommendations to address the mismatch. This report should also identify target industries, characteristics of land they require, identify locations where the land exists, and detail the improvements required to make it development ready. And again, with all the other work that Metro is doing around the SEDS, building out regional strategies, talking about jobs ready land, all of this fits in here. What we want to make sure is that the entire region is represented, that it is not just Portland centric, that we're bringing in the West Side, the East Side, and Clackamas County, and that we have a fair amount of business representatives who are industry experts who can speak directly to what they need in the market to get these things done. Next slide.
Those are the summary of recommendations that we have for you today. We recognize that a lot of work is still ahead of us. We're just getting started and we're here for it. We're going to show up. We're going to be a part of that SEDS conversation that Elizabeth mentioned. And we recognize that this isn't a clear path. What we're hopeful of is that we can all continue to work together and that everyone can be included in the conversation. Next slide, please. Our ask for you is that you direct Metro staff to continue to work with our industrial land work group to integrate these recommendations into your work, including the recently adopted economic development resolution. That's going to look different ways as we move forward, but we would really love your support and collaboration with your staff.
Great. And before we pass it back over to Catherine. I guess there's just a few final thoughts I want to share. It feels like we are in a moment where there is a very strong false narrative about what it is when somebody like me says growth. Growth for me does not mean data centers. Growth for me is not anti-environmentalist. Growth for me does not mean no farms and forests. Growth for me does not mean sprawl. Growth means smart, well-thought, modest growth. And in order for us to get there, we have some work we need to do. We have systems that were set up decades ago that made sense at the time that it's time to modernize. And we are well positioned with Metro to do that work. I reject the false narrative that business is the enemy of the environment. I reject the false narrative that we can't sit together with 1,000 friends and find a path forward. I think that's a very comfortable place for a lot of people to sit, and I'm simply going to push back against that. I'm sorry to bring up Councilor Gonzalez in this conversation he and I had years ago, but I'm going to do it anyway. About 4 or 5 years ago, we sat down for breakfast and he had just gotten married. And I said, in a couple of years, you might have a kid, which I was right.
Clairvoyant.
You're welcome. And I said, in another 15 to 20 years after that, that kid's going to be leaving the house. They're going to be going to college or trade school or starting at PCC. They're going to be thinking about what's next and they're going to be meeting new friends. And as they meet new friends, they're going to say, where did you grow up? What did it look like where you lived? And I guarantee every parent wants their kid to say something like this. I rode my bike to the park. I had clean drinking water. I saw the sunny sky. I went to lots of different houses where my friends' family spoke different languages. I don't think anybody wants anything different. So if we can start with that as our outcome, the question is, how do we get there? And I can tell you, we don't get there with people working minimum wage jobs. If we're not honest about what our economy needs for mid-size and large business, the small businesses we all care about simply won't exist. That is just a fact of how the economy works. And so let's work to figure out what we do have inside the urban growth boundary, where we can do redevelopment, what makes sense, and then be really honest about what it means to have smart expansions in real time. If we have to work around the system is broken. And I've seen been part of efforts the last couple of years where we've tried to work around the system because we can't get through the system fast enough. I'm hoping that this is a different path forward. So thank you for your time. We're here for questions. And we do appreciate all the work staff has done to help us get here.
Delightful.
Thank you, colleagues. Questions, Councilor Simpson.
Do you have a couple slides or?
Oh, at the end.
Thank you, President Wong. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you so much for coming out and sharing those recommendations with us. I do want to share with the public a bit about our conversation and the table that we sat at probably about 3 months ago or so with Councilors Lewis and Gonzalez and myself, where we talked about these things. And I think the bigger issue that we talked about was the trust. And I think that last comment that you made, that we can all live together, intertwined with one another, is absolutely true. It is true, because guess what? We can grow smartly and we can develop smartly if we all understand that, yes, we are in a system that is outdated and needs to be modernized, but also understanding and listening to the people that we serve. They're asking for us to do something more about our economic vitality. So thank you. I do want to talk about 2 of the recommendations with you. Recommendations 4 and 6. And I want to lean into 4 first, because we have set up a job-ready lands inventory, which now we can take those lands that we're talking about, once we've identified that they are developable and we can develop the full parcel, we can put them into a database to be shopped around to trade and trade sector and corporate partners. This is the route that we need to move into. And this is part of that modernization, because we've always designated lands, but we've not shopped them around. And I'm proud to say that we are doing that. We're getting ready to start doing that right now, because the urgency is long past, but we are meeting this moment right now. Could you tell me how you see the job ready lands inventory working with recommendation number 4 once we've identified, like really filtered out what works, what doesn't work, and what we really have.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, when we were sitting around the work group table, the question was asked of the jurisdictions, if there was a pool of funds that you could tap into to do some rezoning in your city or region, would you take advantage of it? And they said yes. And so, number one, I would say, where are there some dollars where there can be some kind of match for jurisdictions? So before we start counting the land, they have a chance to reassess the land they have. I'm going to think of one jurisdiction in particular that has land that's been zoned industrial that abuts up against a residential area. The way it's been developed over the last 10 or 15 years makes that industrial land really difficult to change. So it's now a laydown lot. It's a series of laydown lots where people leave their equipment. So it's technically industrial, but it's not being used. So could that jurisdiction say, look, maybe we rezone this and then we trade it out for this land over here? So one, I think be in touch with the jurisdictions to ask what they need, what support they need in advance of doing any counting. But two, I think it's really critical that in that conversation, you have developers at the table. And I come back to slope. Councilor Rosenthal, I know you know this is my favorite topic. But when we hear from our developers that industrial developments can occur on slopes greater than 7%, 10% being the highest, and that for years, Metro was counting industrial land with slopes up to 25%. To give you a sense of that slope, the steepest part between government camp and timberline is 6%. So we're talking 7%, 10%. So when there was an agreement made and land above 10% was taken out, that was 1,400 acres of land that was previously identified as industrial that was taken out. The goal here is to say, what are the other barriers? If you have 100 acres of land in quarter acre and 1 acre lots, are those really industrial lots? Again, I'm told 5 to 10 acres for industrial use. So could they be a kind of industrial land that has a different grading? Maybe, but having a tiering system will allow us to I think, get there. So I think some of that work needs to come in advance of then being able to score and say, here's what we have available. So I think that's the work. And I think, again, I think that we have experts throughout the region, both on the private sector and in the jurisdictions that know the land like nobody else. And I don't think that this is another long-term study. I think it can be done in a relatively short amount of time with some support. But I think that's the first step for that part of the work.
I think I would just reiterate, it has to be all the land. I think what I've heard so far about the plan is exciting, being able to market sites that are ready to places where they have businesses that want to come here. Awesome, amazing, we need that. And we need to look at all of the land. And I don't, as far as I understand right now, I don't know that that's part of the plan. So I think we need to maybe peel it back a little bit further. And as Elizabeth said, make sure we're engaging with all the partners across the region.
Council President, maybe I could add just a couple of thoughts as well. I appreciate that. And one of the elements of the Job Ready Lands work is for the growth management staff to take a very hard look at the way we have counted buildable land. We are continuing to do that. We'll coordinate closely with WEA and others on that. There's also a related piece that shows up in the Job Ready Lands work and will need to show up outside of that as well, which is really about identifying what are our target industries as a region, what kinds of things are best suited to be located here and to thrive here, and how can we identify sites both inside and outside the UGB that are a good match for that. Even before we feed them into the database, how do we identify that and understand how those match up with the buildable lands inventory work that we've done? So it's kind of a gap analysis approach. And we anticipate doing that, which is, it's different. It's not instead of what is being proposed here, but it's another element of it.
Agreed. And, we get into industry analysis, and I think that is going to be a super, super important topic as we move forward, because we have to understand what values do we want to bring to those sites that are developed and how we want them to impact our community. So thank you for that, Catherine. my next piece is this. I don't think we need to start a new table. We already have a table. We just need to continue to work within that economic development subgroup, work group, and build that table out and codify it in a real way. I don't think we need to double back and backtrack the work because we've already started there. So I'm super excited about recommendation number 6 because that is going to lead us into how we do the work around building the economy here in this region. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll just go around the table. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Wong. Well, Elizabeth and Jamie, great to see y'all. Also shout out Teddy. He said it's his first time ever in the Metro Chambers, so I just wanted to give you a warm welcome, and hopefully it's not the last. Very excited about the work that y'all have done, and can actually start with a quick story because last night I did a town hall with Senator Janine Solman and Mayor Beach Pace. And as you all know, Senate Bill 1586, a very passionate topic of conversation for that part of the community, but also I think a broader signal about the different conversations happening about land use and about opportunity. And I think about the way that we should be developing policy transparently, collaboratively, in coalition, in bringing all kind of interested parties along. And during the town hall and in conversations with people and in conversations after, I think I really walked away with this spirit of like, one, Oregonians are really smart, right? And two, people are open to change. It just matters how you get there. And I think I want to commend y'all for the coalition that you put together to really ask some, I think, really important questions that are almost like these like super technical looks at a process, which in my 7-8 years at the Metro Council, we've done a few urban growth cycles. And, whether we're doing the UGR or we're doing some other element of it, it never quite seems like the perfect moment to have a conversation about this part of the process or this part of the process, because this is just a small window of it. And I do think that this moment that we're living in, I think it really requires us to look at a system level about the work that we need to do to create opportunity, and mostly to, when we look at the map and actually say what is here, what is doable, to be able to say that with a straight face, and hopefully all of us agree. I think that we're kind of living in this really interesting time where I feel like people are not agreeing on a set of facts, or there's just like these multiple realities. And I think one of the most important things Metro can do is kind of converge those things to say, this is what this region can do. And I think there's such a great opportunity for that. One of the things that I think after the short session, with this work that you're doing, with the work that Councilor Simpson helped to create with the work group, is I really think that the Metro Council needs to have a really intense work plan around the economy, our land use system, like from zero. Like we should all be learning again from zero and understanding a little bit more. And so I think that these next few months, I'm hoping that we have the opportunity to dig into that. So I guess I'm curious with my, and now here to my question, with the recommendations, I'm curious, and this is maybe more of a question for staff, because there's 6. What do we feel like the timeline of potential action could be for some of these? Like what feels actionable? What do we feel might need a little bit more broader discussion with additional stakeholders? I mean, can you walk me through all of the requests, Catherine, and what you think a timeline for maybe adopting them or considering them might look like?
Thank you, Councilor, for the question. I do have a slide that I think I'll wait until the very end of this discussion. And it doesn't directly answer that question, but what it does is list out some of the topics we expect to bring back to you all in work sessions in the coming months. And actually, why don't we go ahead and do that? Georgia, if you wouldn't mind just pulling up that slide. The topics aren't a direct match one for one, but I think you'll see a lot in those topics of some of the questions and suggestions that have been raised. So I think I'll just walk us through that real quickly, and then I'd like to come back to your specific question.
Yeah.
What we are envisioning, we've been working with our government affairs partners and our team to really do what, Councilor, you just described, to build sort of a set of conversations for you all and information about land use and about economic development, that we can bring some presentations, some experts, some information, and have this type of conversation in this type of very transparent setting. So what you see there, state of the region's economy, industrial land supply, which is very much what the recommendations have gone to that we've heard about today. Looking at the workforce gap analysis that we have, work that we have done. You all have actually asked us for some information on data center challenges and opportunities.
Yep.
You've asked us for information on agriculture. What role does our agricultural industry play in our economy, and really understanding that. And then I think the other place where a number of the recommendations that we heard about today really show up is in that urban growth management decision follow-up. That's our team bringing back to you some of the changes that have been made already as a result of the recommendations, and some of the technical changes that we could envision making, and then maybe some explanation of why something might be better accomplished in a different way. So those things, this is sort of probably an 8 to 10 months schedule for you. So I'm not going to say in 10 months we're going to have every single answer, but we expect to bring these things to you on a regular basis. And the date that is not up there, but is a more concrete date, is May 7th, when we will bring back to you a more fleshed out version of this and a work plan for the job ready lands work that you all asked us to bring back at the last meeting. So again, I fully expect to be engaging with WEA and other partners as we develop that work plan and as we develop this information. So is that a answer to your question?
It's good. I think, especially in terms of as we start to think about how we take potential action on some of these recommendations and they continue to flesh them out, it's very important to me. I mean, with the Governor's Prosperity Council, I think land use is going to be one of the top topics of conversation. And as the largest metropolitan planning organization in the state of Oregon, I think we have a duty and a responsibility to be at the table, to use. I mean, there's no better army of planners in Oregon that knows the system and what can improve than I think people at Metro and then the advisors around us. And so I think that this work plan to me is essential, so that as Metro is asked to lean in, that the entire council feels very confident about what our opportunities, what our challenges are. And I'm really excited by this ask to define a problem statement, because what actually is the problem that we want to solve? And I think that this council has a lot of extraordinary leadership to be able to design that problem for industrial areas in Northeast Portland, for Gresham, for Happy Valley, for all parts of the region. Because like Councilor Simpson mentioned, we want to make sure that everyone has opportunity in every corner of the region. So I think that the work that y'all did is essential, and it's incredible for that. I really like some of these technical elements for us to think about through our UGR. The slope issue is one that I'm super interested in. I was talking with someone that I think one of the city of Portland economic analysis, I think they included up to like 30% slopes in some things, which I'm like, what in the world are we doing here? And maybe there's something I'm missing, but I have a question about like this doesn't feel realistic. And I think we need to have a more realistic conversation around those things. And but anyway, I feel like I've waxed on quite enough here, and I'm gonna give it back to Deputy President Wong, or Acting President, sorry.
Let's go online with Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Interesting presentation. Good conversation. We've got lots more, as everyone has already said so far, to talk about. Elizabeth, you said you rejected the idea that you can't sit down with 1,000 friends and work through a conversation on this. But I see they're missing from your list of people consulted, and I'm wondering why.
This was a WEA work group, and so it was WEA membership.
So you didn't reach out and talk with anybody outside WEA?
Yeah, so typically when we convene, same with our transportation funding work group, we bring together the best and brightest of our members to have this conversation and come work through policy ideas. So that was the charge, and that's what we did. This is the second time we've done this kind of work at WEA. And so if there's another opportunity in another work group, I certainly would be open to thinking about doing it differently. Councilor Nolan?
Well, from a WEA perspective, I can understand that. But Metro Council, Metro isn't WEA. And my point in making the connection between your comment about sitting down with 1,000 friends and the membership of your work group is that, which I didn't understand that it was limited to WEA members, it leaves out a lot of voices that I think Metro needs to pay attention to. So we've talked a little bit this morning about how we move forward, and I think I'd like us to think very seriously about having different perspectives brought to the fore before we make decisions on landing on any particular definition of industrial land. There are developers who work almost exclusively in areas where land has already been developed and it's either underutilized now based on its zoning or it's in disuse. And what kind of investment could be made publicly or privately to make that land, which is already served by transportation infrastructure, electric infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, is that a viable approach, which I don't see in this particular report. It may not have been a topic that you were bringing up. So colleagues, I think that's something that in keeping with our interest in finding land readily available or with very little investment could be utilized for hosting jobs. We've got a bunch of it in the region, in cities, including Portland, but other cities, that is underutilized, and that we need to bring in people who are experts in that area before we decide what land is or isn't feasible for development.
Might I respond?
I didn't ask the question.
So just two things. So one, we agree. We think there's lots of land inside of the urban growth boundary that can be developed. I think the question is, what kind of land is it? And so to my point, when we say that there's 4,500 acres of industrial land, what I would say is that's gross acreage. That doesn't tell the story of the land. And so to your point, is there an acre here or there that might hold some kind of industry that
50 or 100 acres.
So,
I'm talking about a block.
I'm 100% in agreement with that. But where I would like to push back is one of the reasons WEA held this work group is it has felt for a long time as though the voice of developers, the voice of industry, the voice of small, medium, and large size business has not been heard at Metro, where 1,000 Friends, in our opinion, has had an outsized opinion at Metro. We're trying to balance the playing field. That's what this effort was. And I think that the fact that Metro held the roundtable on the urban growth report, which was mostly with industry folks who felt like they had not been heard, is representative of you all making that effort, and we appreciate that. But I would say that I feel very comfortable saying that these recommendations are one Metro likely haven't seen before, because the voices that are represented in this memo have not necessarily felt comfortable here. Oh, you're muted, ma'am.
I would like to hear those voices, and I appreciate the report. What I'm saying is it's far from sufficient to inform this council in making a good decision, a solid decision that not only advances industrial and commercial land, which supports jobs, and we need to talk about the kinds of jobs, which I'll get to in a moment. But there's a lot of wisdom, expertise, and professional investment that's not represented in this report. So if we only have this report on which to make decisions about how we will pursue a definition of industrial land, we are denying our region of the benefit of that information because it wasn't your job to present it here.
But I don't think, I don't think we.
I don't want to get into it.
I don't think that we
Chair.
suggested a definition of industrial land in this.
Well, I've heard
I
that.
don't think I don't think we're asking, nowhere in this do we ask Metro to adopt a definition of industrial land. So I just want to be super clear. We're asking for a tiering grading system to understand what the land is and to adopt a problem statement that says we think there's a mismatch between what industry needs and how it's being counted. So I just want to be super clear that we're addressing the recommendations that we're making here and not something else.
Thank you. And I've heard we have a whole series of education and stakeholder engagement that is already planned, that's coming up over the next year or so. So my hope is that everyone comes to the table throughout this whole process and that we work towards, our shared goals. But
Thank you, Council President. And I really want to reinforce that for Councilor Nolan, that from the staff's perspective, the intention is to bring a broad range of voices to you here. And one of on that last slide, actually, our final question was, who else would you like to come and talk to you? So we really do invite that as part of this conversation. So thank you.
additional comments, Councilor Nolan?
Thank you. I have other questions, Mr. Chair. I was interrupted, as you noticed. I'm interested in the kinds of jobs we are looking to put on industrial land. Recent history in the region shows that industrially zoned land has been used to host really low-paying jobs. I don't think there's anyone on this council who wants to invest our efforts, public adjustments in zoning and permitting and land use decisions, in creating the opportunity for minimum wage jobs. So I'm really interested in what this particular report envisions as the kinds of jobs that we're looking to put on industrial land and how we make sure that those jobs, ideally union jobs, family wage jobs, but represented jobs, how will we get there through a land readiness process?
Thank you for that question, Councilor Nolan. I would argue that while there is, I think, one example of some industrial land that was brought in out in Hillsborough that folks see as maybe not as high value wage jobs as we could have seen. I will say that I'm also looking at Intel, and I'm remembering 4 years ago when the head of the Columbia Pacific Building Trades was doing the best he could to get as many rooms as possible because we needed so many journey people coming in to build. Thinking about Lamb Research and the work that they're going to be doing to expand out in Tualatin. Also, union wage jobs is the expectation there in Sherwood. Here's one of the challenges. Land is owned by private sector folks, and there are when that land is then zoned industrial and sold, there's a disconnect between how we can ensure that labor is getting connected. And when I say labor, let me rephrase that union jobs are getting connected to that land. The way we do that is for the public sector to lean in and to have conversations. If there's an economic development tool that Metro is interested, that would then be tied somehow to prevailing wage. I think that's a conversation that Metro should be having with yourselves. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the construction field, but I think also in other labor opportunities to get high wage jobs. Manufacturing historically has been one of those places where we see those high wage jobs, whether they're unionized or not. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but again, when there's private land being sold to a private developer, the government has limited opportunity to put guardrails around that unless there's going to be an economic development incentive that then ties them to that. And I also would hope you know that
We have some
all of our
there are plenty of ways that government can incentivize and or require the kinds of development we want to see, and not just disperse data centers around Hillsborough, which has 30 of them now with almost no employment per acre. And when they do have employment, it's pretty low wage. So I'm looking forward to working with you and others to make sure we're being smart about how we're trying to get land ready for industrial and commercial development.
I think we said the same thing, which is that there are opportunities to create incentives to help tie the investments in that land to well-paid jobs. If I didn't say that clearly,
I'm
I
looking
agree.
forward to working with you on that, but it won't happen on its own. It won't happen.
I'm not
if
sure I
land-
suggested that. Yeah,
Can I finish a sentence?
pardon.
That kind of development that supports the community, that provides families with an opportunity to prosper, build their own wealth, doesn't happen by itself. Government has to be aligned and coordinated with private sector. Neither can do it on their own. I think you and I are in complete agreement about that. But we've got evidence in recent history that that hasn't happened. And I think that means we've got a big hurdle to get over if we're going to do things differently in the next 10 years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I want to be really brief, but start just by reminding us that there are parts of our region that 150 years ago were built out because of their strategic location for industrial use. And they are now some of our region's most prized treasures, some of them in my district, some of them not within my district, but communities that have employment bases close to where people live, close to where people shop, close to where people learn. And those are the kind of communities we're trying to replicate, lift up, and support. And I think one of the biggest places we break down is between what I call big land use and small land use. The land use decisions we make here about how we're growing, and then the decisions that are made at the very most local level, zoning and how it gets down in the neighborhood associations. And I hope that we put a focal point on that for both council discussion in the future and for the practitioners table. I'm supportive of everything you've brought forward. Just want to add that color, and forward we go.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenblum.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I want to thank WEA for bringing forward these recommendations. I agree with them, but as it was pointed out, it's one thing to come up with good recommendations. It's a lot more work to actually implement them. So there's a lot of work going forward. I have one specific recommendation, and recommendation 4 I think is very good, but I think it needs also to include some reference to accessibility to workforce housing in reviewing these industrial lands. I think that's information we need to evaluate. And then in answer to some of the comments that Councilor Nolan made, I think there's 2 answers to that. First of all, Catherine mentioned this specifically. We need to elaborate more what kind of industries we want to bring in, the kinds of skills and the kinds of jobs and the kinds of lands that they need. In that process, we can exclude somebody who's just going to make matchsticks, okay? We can talk about the kinds of jobs and the kinds of industries that we want to bring in. It's going to be very, that's a sort of, you might call it a filter that we'll put on this. So I think that's important, and more elaboration is needed on that. Every job, every industry has different, I mean, we're not going to become an oil patch development company. We're not going to build I don't think we're going to build the third generation of supersonic planes here. Probably, that's my guess. The other part of that, though, is important that has not been mentioned, is we have to strengthen the ties to the particularly higher, but also secondary education, and that's not mentioned. That's a very important thing. We have to use the resources because these jobs, not just low-paying jobs, high-paying jobs, require a good workforce. And we have to tie our educational system better into that. And that starts at, say, middle school, goes particularly to the high school, and then also to the higher centers of higher education. So I think that's important. So that's one comment. And then on a general thing, economic development is a big deal. And we think, and this focuses on industrial lands. And I think that's important, but you have to remember that we're not just an industrial economy. We're a tourist and recreation economy. We're also a transportation economy. I don't think, if you ever sit in the Columbia Gorge and watch the number of trains that go through the gorge, bringing commerce and development to this region, you realize how important that is. We are the easiest major conduit for all sorts of commerce. And so we have to recognize the transportation industry and its potential needs and its potential role in that as well. So it's a big issue. And I think we also have to consider, the entire state and particularly the Willamette Valley, but it's a big issue. This is one piece of it. And I very much appreciate you bringing forward. There's a lot to work on. And I think staff recognizes that there's some very positive things here. And thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all for coming in and sharing this body of work. I feel like over the next year, this council is going to get like a master's degree in economic development and land use, and that's what we're here for. So thank you so much for bringing this. Thanks for bringing it to MPAC, and hope to see you again. And we'll have many more conversations coming up.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Council. And if you all do have specific requests for topics or other presenters, please don't hesitate to reach out and send them on. Education. Thank you, Councilor.
And colleagues, I think just to set the tone, Councilor Gonzalez mentioned in a previous meeting that we want all the data, we want all the briefings, we want to make the best decisions we can. And I think that's part of the spirit that we're leaning into, is how do we bring experts of all different viewpoints together to this council to share and help us make the best decisions we can. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to. All right, we're going to move on to our last presentation for the day, item 2.3, integrating arts in planning and exploring Metro's role in supporting the regional arts ecosystem. Moving on to this topic, we'll be discussing the intersection of arts and planning. And would folks mind taking outside?
Excuse me, folks.
Thank you. And how the intersection of arts and planning can be paired together to bring energy and innovation to our region. I know this council shares the values that support this work, that plays a significant role in supporting our regional economy, building a vibrant community, and creating a sense of place where people can call home. Metro recently engaged in a national training cohort on the subject and is also currently actively incorporating arts into the future vision process. To support this effort, Councilor Lewis has worked on a resolution to better support integration of arts and planning, which I'm very happy to be co-sponsoring. Today, our staff will walk us through these recent proposals and actions and talk about the draft resolution, which is scheduled to come before council at our special council meeting next Tuesday. We'll also hear an overview of a regional cultural plan initiated by our Creative Futures through the City of Portland. And there's a lot going on, so I'll ask Malou Wilkinson, Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research, and Dana Lucero, Principal Regional Planner, to introduce our speakers and take it away. Thank you.
Right. Well, I hope that we can keep your attention, Council, because we are so excited to be here today to share with you a lot of the work that has been going on that our department has been involved in related to bringing arts and creativity into our work. And so I'm going to let Dana talk about the great team that we have here today, and we're going to try and keep ourselves moving through the exciting information that we have for you today. Again, I'm Malou Wilkinson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research. And really, you know, Metro over the years has tried to find ways to be innovative in the way that we approach our work. And it's really exciting over the last few years to have been focusing innovation in one way towards arts and creativity, and exploring ways to bring art and artists and creative practices into the work that we do. I don't want us to be thinking only about like the art that is hanging on the wall or that you go see on Broadway or in the Keller. We're talking about the practices that really take us out of the conventional way that we're thinking about our work, and both opening up our own minds and bringing in new voices to the work that we're doing. Creativity is really integral to the way that we approach effective governance and resilience and long-term sustainability. So Councilor Wong already talked about the different elements that we're going to hear about today. And Dana, I'll turn it over to you and you can introduce the team that's here.
Great. So before I get to the lovely individuals sitting next to me, I want to bring us back to planning and the arts. We started the, oh, sorry, I'm Dana Lucero, I she, her pronouns, and I manage our community placemaking grant program. It's been a while since I've been in front of you, so thanks. There was a recognition in 2016 that Metro had a role in investing in human and social capital. And what grew out of that recognition was our community placemaking program, which uses arts and culture to strengthen people's connections with each other. So we've already kind of established a pretty strong network of artists that we have been supporting over the last 10 cycles. We also know that community is ready to engage in creative practices to solve challenges that are really critical in our region. And so we've been connecting with the arts in this way. I want to also acknowledge the work that the Glean program has done over the last 25 years, that the photo exhibit that's been hanging at the month, that the housing department, that we have started to make inroads. But we're going to tell you quickly today about the work what we learned from national examples. Molly and Lakecia will speak, and then I'll introduce our Future Vision artist lead in that moment. Sorry, this slide is a slight lag.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, Council. Molly Cooney-Mesker, she, her pronouns. I'm the manager of the Communications and Engagement team in Planning, Development, and Research. So from April through October last year, Lakecia, sitting next to me here, Dana and I had the opportunity to represent Metro in Smart Growth America's Culture and Community Network. Metro was one of 9 MPOs convened by Smart Growth America to explore how cultural and creative strategies can really transform community engagement and move our agencies toward planning that is more accessible, more equitable, and community-driven. Many agencies across the country, large and small, see the value of incorporating arts and culture into planning. Our cohort included MPOs in the Bay Area, Southern California, Chicago, Richmond, Virginia, among others. Next slide, please.
I'll be doing this slide. I'm Lakecia Griffin, she, her pronouns. I support the regional transportation planning in communications and engagement. And I was blessed to be a part of that cohort and learned quite a bit myself. And I just want to acknowledge, like, whether or not we truly acknowledge the impact of arts and culture in our day-to-day life, it's very inspiring for many of us, really all of us, daily. But we'll talk about in the context of the planning work and why it's important, you know, because it can be easy to be caught up in our own bubble of acronyms and jargon. And so through this peer learning, we learned some of these takeaways. And artists really are translators. They can ground planners in real experiences and also help with inclusive engagement, allowing participants to use their own terms and also just expression beyond the written word and also spoken word, which largely we rely on just English in our work. And so arts really just take us out of those boxes and get to the micro, the macro, and making those connections and those webs between our work. And yeah, creativity is really a great tool for collaboration. As a reminder, we tend to put artists in this group, but we all have creative capacity. I've seen it in our work. I see it in the council. I see it in leadership. And I just want us to all remember that in this work. It's not just a special group of people who can do this. We all can. And it's beyond just like connecting to the public. I feel as though it's really supportive to us in this work. It feels heavy. I want to point out the moment in the region, in our country, in this world. I'm not gonna lie, it's existentially dreadful. But a lot of the optimism, a lot of the joy that I find is through the arts. And I feel like this is a great time for us to anchor ourselves in this work. And arts really humanizes us and can humanize government because rightfully so, there is quite a bit of scrutiny about our work and how we carry on and do business as usual. And so I think it shows a willingness to be vulnerable, to be innovative, and that there are real people behind this work and we have to work together. And so through that, embracing these creative ways, it just shows that we have an open mindset and we can be a little bit more imaginative in our planning. Next slide, please.
Great. I just want to highlight a bit more that we are in good company as we pursue this work. So I mentioned that we are in this cohort with 8 other MPOs across the region, or sorry, across the country. But we're also joined by a few regional organizations and cities who have been doing this work for many years, who are really leading in this space. And those included the Atlanta Regional Commission, ARC, who has been staffing an arts and culture team since 2012. One of the really interesting programs we learned about that ARC has spearheaded is a community-centered design program that offers an immersive 4-month program where community organizations who are serving underrepresented communities collaborate with local officials and planners to design projects and planning initiatives focused on arts and culture. Through this program, ARC developed a directory of local artists who are interested in civic work. So they have that as a go-to resource, both for the Atlanta Regional Council, but also the other agencies in the region. And they created a handbook for incorporating the arts into planning efforts across the region. So they're really serving as that sort of like supportive and connective tissue for connecting public sector work with arts and culture. Boston's regional government has an arts and culture department that incorporates creative placemaking strategies and social engagement into planning initiatives. They're really focused on building social capital and civic engagement, equity, inclusion, and social justice that is grounded in arts values, where arts and creativity are tapped as really the catalyst for that social change. So they're really centering arts and culture in that work. So just wanted to share some of the inspiring examples that we heard about through this cohort. Next slide, please.
We also learned in our experience that we're actually pretty grateful and that we work at Metro because there's a lot of fertile soil here. As you heard from Malou earlier, this work has been done in many ways already. And council leadership has supported us, heard us out. And I really appreciate that. And so we can continue to grow this practice of integrating arts and culture into regional planning. It's clear that there's no single formula for success, obviously, but we did come back with some takeaways about what the commitment from government looks like. And that includes authenticity. And part of authenticity is being just honest about the goals of these projects and the limitations, but balancing that with like the bureaucratic determination and the flexibility and being willing to take the risk. And I think this risk is probably one of the lower ones on the risks that we take on a daily basis. And again, I'd like to thank our planning leadership and the council members who've already shown these commitments and the willingness to support. And I hope that y'all go along with us on this journey to continue to push that a little bit more. And many of you attended the artist residency for the Future Vision and that presentation a few weeks ago and have shown enthusiasm for advancing this work. So next slide, and we'll talk more about the Future Vision project.
So it became very clear in our cohort that Future Vision was both the best and the worst project to do this kind of arts integration. We can't think 50 years out in the future. That's a pressing thing for our mind, but that's what artists do. Their creativity is exactly what we needed in a project like this. So we had some conversations with artists about how to start that work. And then we're very fortunate enough to have had a long-term relationship with the brilliant person sitting right here to my left, Shubhashini Ganeshan Forbes, and brought her on as the artist lead, and her scope involves including creative moments in Future Vision commissions, helping staff really think about what the problem is, think about our different kinds of engagement, and she herself recognized the importance of having staff be close to a creative process. So I am honored to introduce Suba, who's going to share some thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Metro Councilors, and everyone else for giving me this opportunity to reflect and converse with you. I really want to start by expressing my gratitude to all of you councilors. You warmly and willingly engaged with all the artists and myself during our 3-day residency here at Metro. And as I continue speaking about this with my colleagues in the region and beyond, it is becoming more and more clear that the Metro Future Vision Artist in Residency project is a historic expression of a government agency showing commitment to embracing the creative process in a meaningful and powerful way. So thank you for being willing to shift the business as usual at all cost mindset and welcoming artists to create and work in your midst for a few days. So a quick summary of the logistical path, right, that got us to the residency project. When I was tapped, we had conversations, and during those conversations, I repeatedly heard an acknowledgement that everyone in the team wanted to infuse the Future Vision work with creativity and risk-taking, characteristics that are naturally bubbling out of artists and culture bearers in their practice. So the proposition was for maximum understanding of what creativity, creative process, risk-taking, and art making could look like, let's bring the artists and creatives into the space. So our conversations during our meetings were rich. We had questions like, what would this produce? Is this the right time? How does this fit with the scope? But from all of that dialogue, which itself was a creative process, right? We landed on a clear path for this residency program, 2 goals: making visible artistic creative processes from different types of modalities and showcasing the work of the residency in a final showing and having a conversation. So we had 4 artists. They represented 4 different forms: sound, movement, devised theater, and visual art. And I had a provocation of folks who've never worked together before. And it felt important in this Metro context, as it resembles a little bit community engagement spaces where strangers come together, envision possibilities, and collaborate. And they had 4 prompts that comes from your consultants, Institute for the Future work. So what evolved over the 3 days, culminating in the 2 showcases and reflections, for me, it was truly beautiful to watch. Artists were figuring out how to work together with other artists who are new to them in a new space, quickly, efficiently, and thoughtfully. Metro staff members from many departments were curious, interested, and open to newness. I was moved by how the artists quickly took full ownership of the importance of the work that is being asked of them. I was equally moved by how Metro staff were ready to experience the artists in their work and be thinking about how the artistic or creative process connected with their everyday work. I'm saying this in particular because I heard more about what Metro staff saw as connections and less remarks like, well, we would never have this kind of opportunity. The final showings allowed for reflections that were observational as well as heart-centered. Somehow, the emotionality and truth of future visioning being both a personal thing and a communal imperative felt heightened during the showing and reflections. Audiences spoke about how the artistic work made them feel and how they might use these feelings to propel their future work. I've been deeply reflecting about what's next. I saw hearts open wide over those 3 days of residency and during the showings. People truly allowed themselves to experience creativity in process and take in the full heart-centered meaning of it. You also could naturally connect heart and mind and work, that is your brain work, seamlessly. No one in the rooms dismissed the power of universal emotions that were welling up and being expressed. No one talked about the luxury of feeling through these things when the work is to figure out timelines and deliverables. The experience of interacting with meaningful art making in their meeting rooms allowed for the audience to see that heart work is work, that the barriers we put between feelings and thinking could be made obsolete, and perhaps when we do that, we can do our best work. I do want to talk about the research, right? Science research over the last 20 years and more on brain science connected to artistry and creativity. Before areas of research such as neuroarts and neuroaesthetics developed, there was already ample research to show that human experiences of awe and wonderment, think going into nature, seeing a mountain, the night sky with the Milky Way, a dance performance that makes you cry for no reason, the painting that makes you stop and makes you look. So these experiences of awe and wonderment are scientifically proven to provide pathways for our brains to be resilient, be more creative, and bring our full selves to any situation. With neuroarts and neuroaesthetics burgeoning in the last 20 years, we keep receiving more important information that shows a pathway to well-being, community cohesion, and safety. When people experience artistic expression when they're engaging in artistic activity, they allow for their brains to enter spaces of surprise, curiosity, and risk-taking. This immediately allows for our synapses to transmit the feeling of safety. This safety allows for even more creativity, and that means innovation, future thinking, and true community-centered problem-solving opportunities. So I end my remarks with an emphasis on the humans who bring artistry and creativity to life. Often our society puts value on the end product, the art, right? The performance, the painting, the sculpture, the thing that artistry produces. This residency at Metro that was allowed to occur, puts the emphasis on the humans who make, who build, who process, who ideate, who prototype, who think, and create community in that process. That emphasis on the artists and culture bearers who bring the process alive is crucial. And I believe Metro's way of thinking will amplify the humanity of creativity and artistry, a sense of place and Community stability does not just happen. Hardworking, heart-centered humans make that possible through their everyday actions, thoughts, and collaboration. This is the possibility. This is the excitement in this commitment to building interwoven relationships between artists, culture bearers, planners, and all the policy work that you do in Metro. Thank you.
So we wanted to pause for a moment. I know we're a bit time restricted. We wanted to take the opportunity to hear what your reflections were on the artist residency. I'm going to ask Malou what she thinks we want to do about prioritizing the remainder of our time.
I really want to hear your reflections, counselors, but I also want there to be time for Counselor Lewis to talk about the resolution. So I think we should.
Well, if you're okay, we
keep
can
going.
We'll keep going.
You okay?
I think we'll have quorum, so
You sure?
yeah.
Okay.
It's important.
We're trying to be respectful of your being hungry also. All right.
We're hungry for art.
Wonderful. We had a lot of plans to fill this time, and we had an activity that we are not going to do this time. But because you've had a lot of activities so far. But yeah, it would be great to hear any reflections that you all have. We will be taking some time later in the month that starts tomorrow to have some time to talk just focused on future vision, so we can do a little bit of this potentially then as well.
Great.
So Acting President Wong?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I can start. I was really moved and impressed with the residency. I thought it struck all the right notes. And I think what really stuck out for me was, and the question I asked when I saw it was just amazing that we had 3 different mediums that came together in such a cohesive way. And I think some of the artists mentioned that, like, they hadn't thought about that before. Like, how do you work with artists that do different kinds of art? I think that actually means a lot for us here at Metro, because we're trying to coordinate and, get, our region to act cohesively, even though we're all focused and doing different things. So I thought that there was a lot of lessons and takeaways there of like, how do we do that collaboration across different mediums to, get to the region that we all want to see. Let's go with Councilor Lewis.
Sure. I was just reflecting on my experience meeting the artists through several different engagements, including the coffee time, their pre-engagement work, learning the building. But I was lucky enough to get to spend a little bit of time just walking into their room. And I think it's first a weird experience to just walk into a closed door in this building if your name or your meeting name is not on the like little blue screen outside the door. And this kind of like come one, come all is like a very healthy breakdown of cultural norms that are not norms. And so I think there are opportunities there to even just learn what a common workspace can feel like here. And then also really want to lift up the performance and the fact that we had such respected practitioners join us in the audience. And then to think about the metaphor of migration and blackbirds. And I was literally Googling like blackbird population Portland. And, mostly we think about the amount of poop that they leave on the sidewalks in downtown Portland, but to think about it in a more beautiful way was refreshing. So lots to dig in on about the specific artist, about the specific piece, but then also about just changing our status here. And I think it was really powerful that we used a regular meeting room and didn't try and create a performance space. It was awkward and weird in some ways, but really important in others.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks. Really deep reflections. I thought it was like just this incredible expression of the human condition. And actually, it made me think about freshman year of college at Georgetown. We have this like mandatory class that all freshmen need to take called The Problem of God. And it like basically walks you through like most of the major faiths in the world and kind of the like philosophical tensions between. Anyway, so it really made me think about the first time as this like freshman college student and just like, oh my, you're learning about the way your entire world is changing every single class. And I just like remember the lessons and when I first learned about like predetermination and is everything divinely planned for us, the past, the present, and the future? Or do humans have agency and this robust ability to influence like what happens to us and to others around us? And I've just always been fascinated by that. And this exercise really like highlighted the like anguish and the futility of what's the point and help. You know, I would really remember the feelings about that. And just when I think about art, I think about the just like this really special ability to kind of like transcend the like 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions or whatever that we perceive and that we engage in. I can assure you that the way I approach future vision now is fundamentally different than I did before. And I hope that others had a really similar experience. But yeah, it was really deep. And I wanted to share just how deep it was for me.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Interesting experience. I had a moment of terror when she handed me the painting and I had to do something with it. But, you know, you got to go with the flow, you know, and that's just what you got to do. So I think it's important. Art, to me, art is the process of imagining and creating what didn't exist before. And as bureaucrats and political people, we need to keep that avenue of our mind open. And this kind of thing in this process, particularly in doing a future vision, I think is very important. So all I can say is, and I have one other thing, art is not just the visual, the performance or the street art. We have street art, frogs. We've created frogs as a street art throughout the world, which is really wonderful. But we also have to think that one of the things that makes Portland weird is because it's artsy. Not just the visual arts, but also the music arts, also even the food arts. So I think it's a big thing, and I think we just have to, as they say, keep on keeping on.
All right, well, thank you for taking the time to share your reflections. We appreciate it. And this has been a pilot project for us. The bringing the arts into the future vision is a new piece. And I'm sorry, Dana, I'm jumping in here. I also just want to thank our building people. They really worked just smoothly with us to bring something into this building and to use our rooms in a way that we haven't in the past. And so that just want to acknowledge that was really terrific and we appreciate it very much. I'll turn it back to you, Dana.
Great. I'll add to that. The metric for me for the residency was that the artists felt like they had a meaningful experience and that they would want to do that again. And that was the case. And we'll get to hear more from them next week. But Molly, I'm just going to say we'll probably table this part. We have more planned and we can't wait to tell you more about it. I'll tell you briefly about the regional arts framework that is in your packet. So you have all of the resources to go back and dig in. But our Creative Futures intended to be a regional framework to advance arts and culture throughout the Tri-County area. It was initiated by the city of Portland because their auditor recognized that they needed to have an updated plan. And Metro played a role. Portland 5, Robin Williams sat on the project management team. We were one of a few jurisdictions who gave funding to the effort, and then we were invited to comment on the draft. It's filled with really interesting findings, so I encourage you to take a look at it. I'll just highlight for you here that community surveyed really recognizes or emphasizes the importance of arts to their daily life, their quality of life, and that there's a strong factor of the arts and culture region driving the economy of the region. But really, I think this 2022 fact is super interesting. So the nonprofit arts and culture industry generated $459 million in economic impact and almost 7,000 jobs. Those are the groups of people that we support through our placemaking program. And there was 5 goals created. I'll let you read about it, but really the vision statement, I think, which was shaped by engagement, the community-based steering committee, is that we envision a tri-county region where all of us have access to relevant and dynamic arts and culture and creative experiences as an essential part of our lives. And I would say that work is an essential part of our lives, and creative experiences in work is what we're really here talking about today. There are regional recommendations under each 5 goals, and then there was some Metro specific ones. Sorry, I'm always having a trouble with this clicker. Can you advance the next slide, please? Thanks. The intention is that the participating jurisdictions are invited to create their own implementation plan from the recommendations included in the overall plan. And so if that were something that Metro Council wanted to do, we would have a good starting point to make that. Next slide, please. This is where I'm going to hand it over to Councilor Lewis to talk about the draft resolution and wrap us up.
Sure, thank you so much. Councilors, there's a resolution in the packet, but I don't want to just read through it. Instead, I want to speak about the intention behind, and that is recognizing that our region is so unique because we've had such a rich resource and infrastructure for the arts, and arts support the economy, they support our emotional health, they support physical health, and frankly, they are undergirding a lot of people's reasons for being here. People move or choose where they live based on jobs in the economy. They choose where they live based on family. And then after that, they're really looking at where is it that I can find a place where I can do my cultural practice, where I can find connection and meaning. And those are arts alignment practices. So looking at where we can put into action right away some of the learnings from Our Creative Futures and the work that our staff have already been doing, incorporating cultural practices and the arts into planning. I felt it was right for us to really recognize some of the places we found success, community placemaking, 10 cycles in, glean decades of investment and perfection of that practice that's actually being replicated more places now. And then leaning into our kind of uncomfortable moment as we're no longer going to be hosting premier performing arts as the operators of the 5 venues in the city of Portland. What is next for us, recognizing that we're freeing up some capacity in some way and also losing a connection in other ways. So really looking at this hopefully as a resolution that affirms for our staff and for the community our commitment, that helps direct our COO, that helps us look at a North Star for how we make funding decisions in the future. We cannot always plan with unlimited funds, but when we are committing significant funds, it's only appropriate that we incorporate creative practice, residencies, and creative engagements. We've done it in parks, we've done it in planning. Will we do it in WPES? I don't know. I hope some framework like this can shine a light for that. So there are so many ways that this agency touches the artistic ventures of residents in every corner of our region. And I hope that we can remain relevant both in stretching our scope of practice, but also making sure that the region remains creative. There are really large funding cliffs for a number of arts organizations right now. We cannot solve that. With our current budget, with any future budget we can imagine, we will not single-handedly fix it. So I think it's not just a funding problem, it's a values and a practice conversation. I'm happy to take questions, Counselor. What we should probably do is make sure that people have a time to look over the draft resolution. It is scheduled for next week. But I think this is one that helps us support our staff, support the work that was presented here today, which we've all participated in. It is a best practice.
Great. Questions?
No questions, just really grateful for the work. And I know Councilor Lewis has been a champion for the arts on the council since day one. go to every event, every arts like adjacent event that Metro does, your leadership on the Portland Opera Board. I think it's really important as well. I guess like my question is how in this kind of budget environment that our state and our cities are and our region is, like how we continue to find prioritization for these programs and to maybe they're a part of the solution for how communities like build, build those. Anyway, I think that's like maybe my question for Marisa and Malou, but in addition to the great work that Councilor Lewis has done, and Councilor Lewis, if you have any thoughts about like how you're balancing, the need to build housing, the need to do this and all the things, like would really appreciate your wisdom on that.
Go ahead. Sure. Thank you for that question, Councilor Gonzalez. I think, in times of financial constraint, the question of, how are we going to do this always comes up. And I think what I love about this approach and bringing creativity and imagination to Metro is that it's really about how we do things and not changing what we do, but changing how we do them. And I think that gives us a lot of flexibility. This came up yesterday in our targeted universalism retreat, which you'll hear more about on Thursday when we have our next phase. But we don't, as Councilor Lewis said, have a ton of capacity to redirect funds, but we do have the capacity with the brilliant people that work here and that we interact with to be creative and to think about how we can incorporate things into our process that are different and bring different voices in and different perspectives. So I think everything right now feels like a challenge, but this to me is one that's exciting and that I look forward to. I come from long lines of artists and writers and musicians. And so, art and writing has been a huge part of my career and my development personally. So I just, I really thank you for bringing this forward and embrace it. And I'm looking forward to, thinking about how we can apply this on things big and small.
And Councilor Gonzalez, I think back to when we were touring with NEA and we stopped and were embraced by the Raven and the power of that sculpture being out on the city sidewalk, but adjacent to such a vibrant cultural corridor with incubator space for business, next to artist workshop, next to housing, deeply affordable housing, all within like 2 city blocks, but anchored by the Raven. So that's what we want to do everywhere. And it's everything from, we already have a 1% for art set aside when we're building infrastructure. How do we translate that over on the other side? Some percentage or some amount of effort towards the practice as part of the planning, not just the built product. And then you look at an organization, big or small, that is trying to make art in this region. What is an organization is a number of people, and these people all have to find places to live. Because when you have an assurance that you're going to make next month's rent and that you have enough food, then you can be creative. If you don't have those 2 things, then you're working the second and third job, and your second and third job are no longer being creative. So I think it's really about matching up our affordability agenda with our creative strategies. Because there are very privileged few people who work one performing arts job or one writing job. Most people who are creatives do 2 or 3 things, whether they're all creative or they work a traditional desk job and then do the other thing. But we need to create an affordability in this region that still allows artists to live and to practice, and frankly, to scope out more rehearsal space. So as we give up what we're doing under Rachel and Bo's great leadership at P5, I'm going to push on us to think less about performance space and more about practice space, more about studio space, more about places that are rough around the edge, but are where the real work happens, not the monetized work, the real work. That's my answer to your question.
I'm really glad I asked that question. Thank you.
And just so you're aware, this is a funny, origin story from this cohort. So back when we were working on the FX line for division, my colleague at Apano, Roshni Takor, oversaw the placemaking work that helped kind of shape that planning process. Dana was actually there as a community engagement manager. And Roshni then got hired to be the cultural director at the Atlanta MPO.
Oh, wow.
And then came back and did this cohort with our staff. So a lot of the national best practices actually came from Portland and disseminated across the country. From Transportation for America is now back, and now we're making it a little more formal of like, how do we incorporate that into our big planning processes, like the future vision, but also like, how do we get that feedback, that creativity into future projects? So it's pretty exciting.
I love origin stories.
Origin stories. All right, well, thank you so much. Great work. And we'll see some of you next week.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we're a little behind. Do we have any? No. Okay.
Just a reminder that our next Targeted Universalism retreat is on Thursday.
That's right.
And I look forward to seeing you all there.
Okay, good. Let's move on to Councilor Communications. We'll start with Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Colleagues, I'd like to share some sad news. And that is that of the passing of Warm Springs Chief Davis Heath Sr., who is a respected elder and leader for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. The chief had a significant role within his tribe and community, and he acted as a liaison with the state and federal government on treaty issues, including a big role in the in lieu of fishing settlements. Culturally, he was also a key figure in the ceremonial functions, and he spoke Shahapton, and that is such an important cultural language that he helped keep alive. Personally, I had the privilege and honor to meet Chief Delvis several times during his time as a representative from the Warm Springs on the Willamette Falls Trust Leadership Committee. And his voice and representation of the tribe was really impactful to me personally, and also for the projects that Metro and I have been keeping alive down at the falls. I had the opportunity to have dinner with him about 1.5 years ago. He was extremely frail then, and I'm just so impressed by his strength. His passing did take me by surprise though, and the amount of folks across the state who are coming forward with stories. That man must have spent so much of his youth driving around all over the place advocating for his people. Particularly in the past few years where the Warm Springs have had so many challenges. I want to lift up that Governor Kotek has ordered flags at half staff, and Metro flags are at half staff today in remembrance. So with that, just a few moments of remembrance and celebration of Warm Springs Chief Davis Heath Sr. Thank you, Acting President.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Any other updates? Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. The council is in a special retreat work session this week, so our next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 7th at 10:30.